Alright, I think I'm gonna try something new because I'm tired and I don't feel like doing all the work that's involved with doing a normal one of these. I'm gonna see what happens if I do a recording with no edit breaks. Just reading it straight through first time. You may get commentary based on what's happening in the story, if it turns out the story's not very good. The Huntress. Chapter 1 of the Equestrian Hunger Games by Festus. A young magenta unicorn mare, barely the age of 14, sat quietly on the hill that outlooked District 12, Twilight. Once it was simply known as Ponyville. However, a certain alicorn had changed that. Sparkler wasn't around when that happened, though. Well, maybe not. She was born 16 years after the Nightmare Moon fiasco. She looked at her bow and quiver as her violet mane was blown by a gentle breeze. It was one of the few reminders of her father before he disappeared. Yes, that's the word. Disappeared. Official sources say he died in a mine explosion. Well, official sources didn't say how his giant blue box also seemed to disappear after his death. Not the box. The doctor. That's what the ponies called him. No pony knows his real name, not even his own wife. That's weird. Still, Sparkler managed to find out why he had the title after some scouring around and spying. He was the doctor, the stallion that helps other ponies, the stallion who heals worlds. Oh my! She didn't understand what that meant, but it made her father sound a whole lot cooler. Indeed. I wish I were the stallion who heals worlds. The mayor's father worked as a miner, which is in contrast to his cutie mark, which is an hourglass. Oh God, he's Doctor Who. Shouldn't that mean that his special talent has something to be related to time? Oh, she didn't know anymore. Another thing her father was amazing at was creating things. He made the bow himself, prizing it as an amazing contraption. Wow, this is Doctor Who. Weird. Afterwards, the unicorn learned how to hunt and scavenge for food. Life was hard now, living under Nightmare Moon's early descent. 30 years too early. How did she do it? Well, hey, you Sparky, said a familiar southern accent. How are y'all doing today? Same old, the mayor grumbled, not facing the stallion, as I screw up the genders of both people. Amethyst Star was her name. However, most ponies in town usually called her Sparkler due to some childhood incidences. She swore she would never think back on that event, but the name stuck ever since. Because she's dark, and can't think back to the events. The stallion she was talking to was the closest pony she had ever been to. Brayburn Apple. Oh God, it's Brayburn! He was annoying, slightly crazy, and impossible. Well, that's more like improbable since he's there. Sparkler liked him for that. After all, she was 10 times worse than the stallion. 10 times worse than impossible. How's my family doing? Brayburn asked as he tipped his Stetson hat like he always did to look cool. Spiffed up to all their meat y'all be eatin'. Spiffed up to all that their meat y'all be eatin'. That's an awkward sentence. Mom's doing okay. She's been eating it for years anyway, Sparkler explained. As for Dinky, well, she's still just a filly. Meat. That was what Sparkler and the doctor had hunted for. After Nightmare Moon's early descent, known as the descent to ominous ponies. Ominous ponies. Plant life was just too scarce to find. That meant District 12 had learnt to improvise. Learnt. They started eating meat, even though they did not have the teeth to chew it properly. After a failed Eternal Night that made it all that much worse for ponies to grow food, Nightmare Moon found an alternative. She would allow the sun to rise and set as usual, but under one condition, that every pony must reap, Sparkler muttered. Dun dun dun! Was that? Brayburn asked, since he did not hear her quite well. That needed to be stated. Reaping Day. It's today, Sparkler finished. How do you mean you forgot about the most important event of the year? Some ponies are going to lose their best friends and family members. And your sis just reached 10. Am I right? I know it's supposed to be am I right, but I hate it when people write it like that. Brayburn said with a frown. Every year, 2 ponies between the ages of 10 and 16 must place their names inside a huge glass ball. How do you put your name in a ball? 1 male, 1 female. The reaped names would be sent to Canterlot, the heart of all chaos and Nightmare Moon's main headquarters, to be trained in the art of survival and thrown into an arena to the death with other districts. District 12 was the underdog, only having 2 ponies as victors. One of them had already died of insanity, too. Poor guy. So, we're all ready to go, right? Sparkler said with her wry grin as she levitated up a few dead rabbits and a bunch of strawberries. Come on, I'm hungry. Sure thing, Sparky. Brayburn chided as he too held up his prizes, fish and blueberries. Yeah, they do have plants. Sparkler didn't like that name at all. That meant Brayburn would use it more often than not, because Brayburn's a dick. She earned it during her first meeting with Brayburn 5 years ago, after the mine explosion that may or may not have killed her father. Yes, after there's a giant freaking explosion, I often name my child I start calling my best friend things that remind her of the incident. She was busy hunting and met the stallion by accident, after a rough start and an arrow to Brayburn's leg, which almost cost him his walking. He asked for her name. I love when things cost me verbs. Sparkler, she grumbled through gritted teeth. Sparky? He asked back, making the mare snap at him. It didn't do her any more justice that she shocked herself on the electric fence that separated the ever-free forest from District 12 later that day. The forest had been declared off limits to by the capital ponies, but that didn't stop Sparkler and Brayburn from hunting and a few of the members of the apple family, one of the largest branches in Equestria, to plant and harvest apple trees. Rules just weren't Sparkler's style, 'cause she's a rebel. That's how she rolls. Obviously, Sparkler was far from being ladylike. She was volatile, rough, violent, and had a long string of hurting other ponies. I thought they said she wasn't ladylike. Sexist joke. However, she has toned down as she matured. Slightly. Hey, she hasn't broken any bones for the past few months, right? She cursed like a sailor pony, and wasn't afraid to get her hooves dirty. Oh, it's great. She was a terrible example to her sister, Dinky. Well, stepsister, actually. She didn't like to admit being adopted when she was just a filly, since it held too many sad emotions. So... Wait, Isn't that Derpy's daughter? Or no, it's Ditzy. That was when she toughened up at the orphanage so other ponies wouldn't pick on her. Pretty sure it should be wouldn't. Come on, let's go to Sugar Cube Corner, which still exists. Sparkler grinned and bolted towards the electrified fence, most probably turned off as it usually is. Most probably. After a short struggle with the fence, haha, you're fat, Sparkler laughed once Brayburn got through with a little difficulty. The 2 ponies headed to the aforementioned Sugar Cube Corner. Always throw aforementioned in any story you ever do. It's one of the coolest words in the English language. Once a beautiful street that held the local confectionery, the place had died down when food became scarce. In the end, the place became a sort of black market, which operated right beneath the mayor's nose. Seriously, the mayor practically lives next door to that place. So, Sugar Cube Corner has now become the black market. Oh, good. They managed to trade fish and squirrels for some green vegetables, chocolate chips, and even flour. Obviously, Sparkler decided to take these things specifically to make sure her mother, Ditzy Doo, or better known as Derpy, The drops. The ridiculous, hilarious drops would make her prized muffins. Ditzy was amazing at baking those, and they were a delight for the magenta unicorn. We in the business like to call this fan service. It's when the author and or creator decides to pander to the fans by throwing something that's not canon and has absolutely nothing to do with the story in as a major plot point. Such as, oh look, Ditzy obviously makes muffins. This makes me relate to it more because I'm of the culture and I get the in-joke. They stopped by Pinkamena Diane Pie, once again fan service, or better known as Pinkie Pie, party planner extraordinaire, next to trade the berries. Good luck, you two, Pinkie said with her euphoric grin as she used some of the strawberries and blueberries to make some cupcakes and give it to them. I have a feeling you're gonna need it, especially you, Sparkler. Dun dun dun. What a friend. Pinkie Pie was famous for two things, her mane and her pinky senses. Her mane, once bouncy and curly, now hung like curtains. Oh, God. Pinkamena hair. I love it. Nightmare Moon's coming was the cause of that, obviously. When Nightmare Moon came down, she made gravity work again. That sucks. She even stopped bouncing around and left that to her children, Pound Cake and Pumpkin Cake. Oh, okay, not her children, but after their parents' death, she took them on as her own. Her pinky senses were something else entirely, never being wrong, even once. Sparkler shuddered as she heard Pinkie Pie's words. A pinky sense that involved her? Not good. Not good at all. Should probably get out of town. Before things get awkward. Sparkler and Brayburn trotted away to the next pony on their list, the mare herself. When they reached the mare's house, Brayburn knocked 4 times. That was the code the ponies shared. Knock 4 times. So those non-ponies can't get in. That meant that it was 2 ponies selling their foodstuffs. Before long, the door creaked open to reveal a young unicorn filly, around 12 years of age. She smiled cheerfully as she greeted the 2 of them. Sweetyville, younger sister to Rarity, who was the mayor of Ponyville, and one of the most generous ponies around. Rarity had only recently become the mayor, after the last mayor was taken away for speaking against Nightmare Moon. Still, she acted as if she were one of the town's ponies and did not request anything more from the ponies of District 12, even if they insisted. Hi, she says simply. Come to wish the others each other luck? Sweetybelle was wearing a cute dress, and a voice that I cannot even hope to mimic, possibly sung by her own sister. Her reaping clothes, of course. Every pony was told to wear something nice on reaping day, so the counterlap ponies could laugh as they watched you get chosen in a beautiful dress, and suits to fight each other to the death. Go figure. It's the same principle as if your mother hears you were in a car accident, they ask if you had clean underwear. Nice dress you got there, Brayburn commented coldly. A smile formed on Sweetybelle's lips as she thanked Brayburn for the compliment, missing the sarcasm. That was when Sparkler eyed something on Sweetybelle's dress. A small gold pin with a picture of a phoenix. It was beautiful and must be pretty damn expensive. It must have been a family heirloom, thought Sparkler. So, how many entries y'all got? 3? Brayburn chided. I got about 18 when I was your age. Sorry, Sweetybelle said, looking rather down. It's not your fault. It's no pony's fault. Except for Nightmare Moon. It's that pony's fault, Sparkler said. She didn't like to see the joyful filly sad, even though they weren't too close. Hey, we all have our names in there, right? How many do you have? Sparkler paused for a while as she counted her number of entries. Every year, she would take a tesserae for each of her family members. Since the Equestrian Hunger Games start reaping kids when they're turned 10, that means she has about 15 entries. She quietly sighed and gave the amount to the 2 ponies. Sweetybelle didn't say anything, since she didn't need to take any tesserae. They gave Sweetybelle some berries, which she paid for, and the 3 ponies left their separate ways. Sparkler and Brayburn even separated the food and money they got so both of their families could be well fed. After a few rocks almost breaking Brayburn's skull and some sarcastic remarks from the stallion, they left their houses, typical way to send each other off. Sparkler lived in a secluded section of former Ponyville, known as the Library. Once upon a time, the place had a giant tree which transformed into a grand library. The librarian, a stallion by the name of Bookworm, was one of the casualties during the war where the sun never rose, also known as Night Almost Eternal. Oh, it's so absolute, and then they ruin it with almost. After that, no pony had a special talent as a librarian and the tree was stripped down. That does bring up an interesting point. If there in this universe, if there's nobody to fill the role, they get rid of the thing. Since nobody had the librarian cutie mark, they did not have a librarian. When Sparkler arrived home, she wasn't surprised to see both her sister and mother prepared for reaping day. They both wore some worn-out dresses since they had little to no money to use for themselves. Dinky was playing around with her magic to make things levitate. Sparkler sighed at the sight. She was terrible at magic and only knew simple levitation spells. Oh, how she wished she was better. Ditsy Doo looked at her with a kind expression which was jumbled up with her wall-eyed stare. Pony said her strange eyes had something to do with the doctor, but it was hard to know how. Even Ditsy forgot how it happened. Going for a bath, Mom, Sparkler said as she passed through, placing groceries on the table. Your clothes are on the bed, my muffin, Ditsy said back as she flew to the food, knowing just what to make for dinner. Sparkler passed Opalescence on the way to the bathroom. Oh, how she hated cats. Worse, it wasn't even theirs. It just appears in the house every morning, forcing Dinky, who loved cats for some reason, to feed her. At first, Sparkler wanted to cook the cat, but Dinky was against the idea. I still want to cook you, you retarded excuse for a cat, Sparkler said as she levitated the cat and threw it out an open window. Apparently, Sparkler is Chinese. Ooh, racist joke. Probably should edit that. Not gonna. Well, that felt much better. After a nice cold bath, Sparkler had used her supply of hot water for today to drown Opalescence earlier that morning. That's because she's a bitch. Sparkler looked at the clothes laid out on the table. No doubt, the faded blue dress once belonged to her mother, just like everything else she owned. Oh, how she resented that. Still, she knew how little money she had to spend. After the doctor's death, they had no money to work with, and Ditsy Doo wasn't as happy as she used to be. In the end, Ditsy became a nurse after the post office fired her for burning down the building. Twice. With a lemon. I don't know if the story wants to take itself seriously. It does, but it doesn't. Sparkler, too, tried to help out with the family by hunting illegally. Something that should have gotten her hung to death. Hung to death. Still, rules were long forgotten by the ponies of District 12, so she didn't really know what the penalty for illegal hunting was, if there was one. So it's illegal, but everybody does it. Very cat's cradle. After putting the clothes on and receiving praises from her family member, which Sparkler ignored, the family left to the town square for the reaping. 2 o'clock sharp, or else there will be severe punishment. Of course, no pony knew what the punishment was. Perhaps it was being exiled, or being sent to jail. Maybe it was getting locked up in a place where you were exiled too. Meh, no pony remembers the rules, right? After getting their DNA scanned by the Bat Pony Guards of Nightmare Moon, I'm Bat Pony, Sparkler and Dinky headed for their respective lines. Sparkler felt horrible when she saw the filly suddenly stop and cry, but she told her to move on. After all, she only had one name in the entire glass ball. What were the odds of her name coming up? At the center of town, there was a building known as the Harmon Building, built in each district as instructed by Nightmare Moon. The Harmon Building. Harmon Munster. There stood a large podium with a microphone flanked by 2 giant glass balls. Behind it were 3 chairs, with only one occupied by Rarity, sat in the middle chair, feeling worrisome for the ponies below who might be chosen to die. Worse, her sister was in the crowd as well. The clock struck 2, and Rarity came on the stage to deliver her speech. She told of the history of Equestria, how it was once ruled by kind Princess Celestia, who was murdered in cold blood by her younger sister, Nightmare Moon, who had managed to escape from her 1,000-year imprisonment on the moon 30 years too quickly. She told of the revolution, which failed and resulted in the destruction of the 13th district. She spoke of the games, a way of Nightmare Moon to make sure she still has power over the ponies despite giving them the warmth of the sun. She spoke of District 12's 2 victors. The first was a stallion by the name of Leroy Winkins, who won just because he was insane enough to jump into the fray holding a fried chicken leg. He was dead now. The other was Berry Punch. Just as her name was said, Berry appeared on the stage, drunk as hell. She attempted to wave at the audience, but ended up hitting a chair, which caused a chain reaction, causing half of the stage to be destroyed. Just shockwave! Berry Punch falling as well. She raised a triumphant hoof, then fell unconscious once more. Rarity, giggling at Berry Punch's uncouth behavior, called the next speaker. She then levitated her chair out of the rubble and placed it somewhere else, knowing what was to come. Just as she sat down, explosions and fireworks could be seen. A dazzling light show almost blinded the entire audience, if they weren't already prepared with sunglasses each. That's what it says, folks. If they weren't already prepared with sunglasses each. In the heart of all the light was a blue mare wearing a purple hat and cape. Yes! Oh, thank goodness. Come one, come all, come and witness the great and powerful Trixie, the mare spoke with pride. She waits for an applause, but of course none came. Mixing tenses, it's fun. She waits for an applause, but of course none comes. It was pretty boring after seeing the same thing over and over again for more than 5 years. Simpsons did it. Still, that didn't stop the great and powerful Trixie from continuing her speech. She states how it was an honor to be there, all the while doing some magic tricks she was fond of, giving this speech about how she's going to reap ponies while doing card tricks. Every pony knew she could only do light shows. So much for great and powerful. After a few moments of pointless rambling and spectacular light shows, it was time to announce the tributes for this year. As always, the mares are chosen first. Ladies first, after all. The great and powerful Trixie. I say it like that because every time it's written, it is all in capital letters. The great and powerful Trixie's horn glowed, and a random name was picked off from the huge glass ball. I'm still not understanding how that's working. She levitates the slip of paper, so is it like a solid ball that she's reaching through the glass to grab these names? Are they like thinking and it writes their name on a piece of paper inside the ball? Does it just show on the front of it? If so, how do they write these? She levitates the slip of paper towards her and gets ready to read it out loud. Or is it just a bowl? Like, is it just like a giant bowl? With a clear and loud and rather obnoxious voice, the great and powerful Trixie said the name written on the paper. Sparkler crossed her hooves, praying that it wasn't her when she remembered Pinkie Pie's warning. The good thing, it wasn't her name. Dinky Doo, the great and powerful Trixie said out loud. Buck, Sparkler screamed. In Chapter 1. Well, that was fun. And those go a lot faster that way. I don't know whether or not you all like the side commentary, all that jazz. Like I said, this may not be a thing, but it may be a thing. If you want it to be a thing, tell me, please. Because these are a lot easier to make. And if you like these better, if it seems more human, then we'll do this. If you all, like, I could still do the other, but these could be quick. And I could get a lot of them done. Anywho, on to the next chapter. Alright, welcome back, folks. I kind of like this laissez-faire style. And I may start a podcast or something like that, or maybe do a live stream, if that would be fun for all parties involved. I don't know. How much do you people want to sit around and listen to somebody tell a story? Anyway, Chapter 2, The Tributes. Although, once again, I do want to point out, there are no edits in this, and I am reading it for the first time, and I am really tired. Still the same night. Anyway, The Tributes. If Sparkler was scared about Pinkie Pie's warning before, she was terrified now. Out of hundreds, maybe thousands of names, it just had to be Dinky's. But she shook her head in fear and shock. No, this couldn't be happening. Of course, it really was happening right in front of her eyes, which is much better than behind them. Sparkler looked around frantically, trying to find the filly in question. She easily found her, trying to merge into the crowds. No pony tried to push her towards the front, of course. They knew how terrible it must be to be chosen as a tribute at such a young age. Obviously, this 10-year-old stands a chance. She started to sprint towards her sister, or at least try to comfort her. That is when 3 black unicorns wearing dark purple armor suddenly teleported right in front of Dinky, all having their spears towards the filly. She told Dinky to get a move on, and get up on stage as soon as possible. When Dinky didn't move, one of the guards levitated her to bring her up front. Why didn't they just do that anyway? No! Sparkler screamed at the top of her lungs. No pony. And Sparkler meant no pony was allowed to touch her little sister. She had weak magic, she knew that, but somehow adrenaline had caused a sudden surge of magic into Sparkler's systems. It's apparently how they work. She felt a grand sensation tugging her, and the next thing she knew, she had disappeared in a blinding flash of purple light. She reappeared right in front of the guard that was levitating Dinky and bucked him square in the jaw. The sudden attack made the guard drop the unicorn filly right into Sparkler's hooves. Fury could be seen in Sparkler's eyes as her horn glowed, ready to fight back any pony else that tried to touch her sister. "Buck off," Sparkler yelled. "You are not taking her away." "Well, well, well," the great and powerful Trixie said with surprise. "It seems we have a fighter in the crowds." "Shut that skank mouth of yours, whore." Wow, I didn't realize we were going that blue. Alright. Well, I'm gonna have to throw a, warning. Sparkler screamed, no longer trying to censor any more of her language. "We still need a tribute, you know." "Then I'll do it. Fine by me," the unicorn mare said, not thinking straight. "Just leave Dinky alone. Leave her alone. Just leave Dinky alone." There was a rush of movement and a loud gasping coming from the crowds. They were not expecting to see any of this, and surely it was a shock to all of them. District 12 was always known as one of the calmer districts, even when it was still called Ponyville. The guards were still surprised by the outburst. As one, the guards trotted towards the mare and levitated her using magic. They weren't going to take any more chances with the pony since she seemed to be terribly unstable. Sparkler fought back hard. She didn't like the feeling of weakness and was desperate in trying to get free. Desperately would have been just as good. Then she noticed someone in the crowds running towards her. A stallion wearing a Stetson hat and brown vest. Stetsons! The stallion came towards the guard and told them to give Dinky to him. A unicorn guard then levitated the filly towards Brayburn, and he hugged her tightly. Tears were streaming down Dinky's face, but not of fear of getting killed. She had something else to be scared of now. Once the scene had died down, the unicorn guard that had carried Sparkler walked towards the cage. He then dropped her unceremoniously in front of the great and powerful Trixie, who was also looking at the mare with a mix of fear and shock. She didn't know Sparkler had weak magic, but who could blame her? That buck into the face was pretty powerful. "May I know your name?" the great and powerful Trixie stuttered, trying to regain her composure. "Amethyst Star," Sparkler said. "Ponies call me Sparkler. Don't you ever forget that." "Well, that's nice," muttered the great and powerful Trixie. "Give a round of applause to District 12's first volunteer, Amethyst Star." Silence. The crowd only responded in silence. That was when Pinkie Pie, brushing her straight mane out of her face, raised her left hoof towards her chest, and did a small thrusting gesture. "Sig Heil," said Pinkie, "Sig Heil," an old way of warding off evil and honoring the fallen. Soon, other ponies had followed suit with her actions and did the same gesture. Sparkler knew they were saying their final farewells to her. The great and powerful Trixie looked at the mare in question again. Somehow, she had a sense that maybe this mare had a chance, but quickly threw the thought away. Lots of other ponies had acted the same way in the past, and they were some of the first to die. "So, who was that?" she asked. "A friend, I presume?" "That's my freaking sister," Sparkler grumbled as her voice cracked, as she tried to resist the urge to strangle the Canterlot pony. "Strange, you don't have the same family name as her," the great and powerful Trixie said, but quickly shut up when she saw the glare coming from Sparkler's eyes. Sparkler didn't like talking about her blood relation with her family. In truth, she wasn't even Ditzy Doo's birth daughter. No pony talked about that much, though, especially after she bucked a pony for trying to get too nosy on her background. "Anyway, it's time to reveal our second tribute," the great and powerful Trixie said as she trotted far away from the crazy mare as possible. "Ready, boys?" With another flare of fireworks and light shows, the great and powerful Trixie levitated another slip of paper out of the glass ball filled with male pony names. She took it by the hoof and examined it carefully. Then she said the name out loud. "Carmel." Sparkler looked at the crowd, thinking about the pony's name she had just heard. She knew she had heard it from somewhere, but where? That was when she saw him, a stallion that was her age with an amber coat and a Tangelo mane. Tangelo. He looked scared. Pathetic, actually. Sparkler even barely knew the guy, even though they were in the same class. The only thing she was aware about the guy was... Wow. The only thing she was aware about the guy was the fact he was very easygoing and a very kind boy. That was why he was always with his two best friends, a blue Pegasus mare named Wind Whistler and a dark gray Pegasus stallion, Thunderlane. Funnily enough, he was also blissfully unaware of the fact that Wind Whistler having a crush on him. Tenses, people, they're a good thing. Funnily enough, he was also blissfully unaware of the fact that Windchaser having a crush on him. I know I'm harping on it here, but it's happened so many times throughout this thus far. Tense, people, it's a good thing. You can play with it, but make sure you get it right. As he trotted up on stage, every pony shuffled nervously. They were all worried if some pony else would make another scene, but was glad when no pony did. He got up on stage and gave a nervous smile to Sparkler, then the crowd. Sparkler had a suspicious feeling that she should know this guy, but threw the thought away. "Now, could our tributes shake hooves?" the great and powerful Trixie said with a smile, probably wondering if Sparkler would throw Carmel into the crowd with an unpony-like strength. When the two ponies touched hooves and looked at each other in the eyes, Sparkler had a sudden flashback. It happened years ago, back when she was 9 and her father had just quote-unquote died. But the vision was as clear as day. I like how they are very stressing the fact that her father may not be dead. Like, she does not even... Anyway, Sparkler was trotting around town at night as it rained, hoping to get some food for her family to eat. What would you hunt at night in the rain? Her skills as a hunter were not that great. She was truly starving and was hunting in the city at night in the rain, and for some reason was confused why she couldn't get anything. Her usual tough and stone-hard complexion was slowly fading away as the rain washed against her mane and coat. Cold, hungry, weak. That was what Sparkler felt like right now. That was what she felt like right now. It was in the same sentence. She knew she wasn't going to last long, and her strength was quickly disappearing. When she just couldn't help it anymore, she just plopped down next to a tree and prayed that her corpse wouldn't smell so bad in the rain. No pony was going to give her a job. She was only 9 years old, and her younger sister was even smaller. Job? Like, bread would be nice. Come on, don't give up just yet, a male voice had said to her on that fateful night. You could make it. A strong hoof then helped her up, making sure she was safe from any more harm. Her weak and heavy body made the pony in question lift her with more difficulty, but he didn't mind. Heavy? Slowly, the two ponies trotted towards the way Sparkler came from. Like, if you've reached that point of exhaustion and starvation, you're probably not that heavy. Sparkler was too weak. Even her eyes didn't seem to respond to wanting to be opened. Didn't seem to respond to wanting to be opened. Instead, she just gave a small sigh that signaled her life. The male pony then continued on their journey. It was going to be rough. He was just as small as her. Still, he was persistent on keeping the filly alive. "Where do you live?" the pony, a young colt, asked. "The library," Sparkler said with much difficulty. "All right, let's go there," the colt said. About 5 minutes or so, the colt had brought Sparkler in front of her house and lay her there, as opposed to taking her inside. Her small body looked even smaller due to not eating right, and that made the colt cringe in sadness. He took a loaf of bread from out of his pony pocket and passed it to Sparkler, who was still too tired to see who her savior was. "Take it," the colt said, motioning to the bread. So in 5 minutes, she hasn't even looked at him. Sparkler carefully opened her eyes and noticed an amber-colored colt holding a loaf of bread towards her. She couldn't make out who it was, her vision still a little blurry, but she didn't mind it that much. She could just go to school and find the pony then. However, she shook her head in arrogance. "It's yours, you keep it," the filly said. "Nah, I don't need it," the colt said. "Anyway, Bon would have wanted me to give it to you too." Sparkler gave a small cry of gratitude, squeak, and took the loaf, which was still slightly warm. Oh my, why was it still slightly warm? They'd been walking 5 minutes in the rain, and ponies aren't known for wearing clothes. When Sparkler tried to thank the colt, he was gone. Oh well, might as well thank him tomorrow at school. That night, the family ate a feast fit for a king, or what seemed like one, if kings ate one loaf of bread. Ditsy Doo had cooked the bread with some blueberries she had picked from the dying bush outside their house, and it was a great substitute for a muffin. That was the day where Ditsy started to get better after months of depression and sadness. The next day, Sparkler tried to look for the colt that saved her life. She was quite surprised when she didn't find him, since his amber coat stuck out in the dull rain. Perhaps the pony was hiding, or just missed that day at school because he was sick or something. Yeah, that was it. Sparkler tried to remember another important information, that he said Bon would have wanted him to give it to her as well. Bon worked at an orphanage, which had a candy store out front. That's kind of mean. Ponies that had no family would be sent there until they were adopted, to stare at the candy, but not eat any of it. Sparkler swore she would never go to that place again after she was adopted, after being left in front of the orphanage's doorstep when she was still a foal. Not that she hated Bon, but it just held too many sad memories. After a week of searching, she finally gave up on looking for the colt. Sparkler quickly came back to reality as Carmel pulled his hoof away from her. No, this pony couldn't be the same colt that had saved her all those years ago. Of course, there was a chance that it was. Not many ponies around her age had amber coats, and Carmel did try to conceal himself every so often. Some ponies... What? Not many ponies around her age had amber coats, and Carmel did try to conceal himself every so often, Some ponies forgot he was even there in the first place. Yes. I'm going to read that in Merrick's voice. And Carmel did try to conceal himself, so every so often some ponies forgot who he was even there in the first place. Yes. She thought back to how much bad luck she had already gotten on this very day. Slowly, she looked around and noticed Brayburn still comforting her sister. Sweetie Belle was also nearby, asking the guards something in her cute way. Probably if she could take Sparkler's place. That was impossible, of course. Only one volunteer is allowed for the Hunger Games. Per Hunger Game. They call them Hunger Games. Thank you all. May the odds be ever in your favor. The great and powerful Trixie said with a final nod to the crowd and disappeared in a puff of smoke. 2 armored guards appeared in front of Sparkler and Carmel and rushed them into the building, the Justice Building, which was also the final meeting place between tributes and loved ones. Quietly, Sparkler remarked the great and powerful Trixie's final words. May the odds be ever in your favor. Yeah, right. Her odds today were as pathetic as opalescence, and that was saying something. The end of Chapter 2. Alright, I should really get to bed, so I think I'm gonna get to bed. Hope you enjoy this format. If not, I'll stop doing it. If nobody wants to hear it, it's fine. But, if you're just looking for a quick sort of humorous examination, this isn't something I would read typically. I would have probably already cut it off by now if I was, because it's not very well written and I slip up on a lot of words where they screw up in the writing, which makes me look dumb and causes me frustration. Anyway.